podcast from Drew and Mike is, I think it's really cool, and that is what I wanted to say.
Two and a mic. Two and a mic. Two and a mic. What is the essence of debate? Is it disagreement at the beginning? Is it discovering disagreement in the middle? Is it parting at the end in a mood of delightful disagreement that terms the experience a debate as opposed to an argument, a verbal joust, or bad-tempered exchange? I have to say I have at various times in my life enjoyed all of the above. Sometimes it's good to have a shouting match, letting the emotions run free, removing the boundaries to open expression, and letting loose the dogs of disambiguation. But when it's something like politics in question, then the grey cells need to be warmed up. Tactics have to come to the fore, and the guardians of graceful argumentation need to lead from the front. Democracy is a touchy subject. It means so much to so many people, and a lot of those meanings are rarely the same. Freedom of speech, right to vote, majority rule, right to protest, and yet I wonder how many of these pillars of democracy hold true these days. No, this is not a wander down the darkened pathways towards Conspiracy City, though I doubt the term theory is rightfully respected when combined with its more ferocious and infamous phrasal partner. So we mostly disagree on the meaning of the word democracy, yet so many of us defend it. In this series of podcasts, Vladi and I, both who have studied politics, Vladi to a far greater degree, disagree on the meaning of the word democracy. We debate respectfully on its application, and in this episode we begin the journey of societal creation. Vladi has devised a list of priorities to build his state in a manner that represents his view not of democracy, but of how society should be. I, on the other hand, a socialist democrat, have my own ideas on how democracy should be, and so it goes. Hi, Vlad. It's good to have you back so soon.
Hi, Zach. Also very happy to be here. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. As you just sort of suggested as well, the sun is out. It's amazing, really, how much the sort of sunshine manages to lift the collective mood, of sort of communities, really. But you must know this, being from Colombia.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, for me, this is nothing special to have a sunny day. In Colombia, we have every day. It's quite interesting because actually we are very happy when we have some shadow and it's maybe a bit rainy, because that's not the normal case. But yeah, after being here for almost 15, 16 years, I'm also very happy when we have a sunny day with blue sky.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of the pictures of when you sort of returned to Colombia, and it just seems like every day is simply a collection of parties, fun, entertainment.
Yeah.
I know that's not reflective necessarily of life in Colombia. I understand that it's extremely difficult, but when you go back to see people after such a long time, the celebrations seem so natural. People just there's a sort of a passion to have fun. It seems.
Yeah, true. It's a beautiful country for sure.
No. I mean, and there are two sets of elections this year. So there's the parliamentary elections next week, but then at the end of May there are also presidential elections. Is it always the case that they're so close together?
Yeah, they are very close together. So we first have the, as you mentioned, for the parliament, for the Congress. And then the things that for the presidential elections, the political parties can use this election that we are having this coming weekend to let the people decide which candidate should be the candidate of the party. So they are doing some consultation as well. So it's actually a very good mechanism that we have in Colombia, that even the people can decide who should be the candidate for the presidential elections in every single party.
Okay, so it's a bit like what the Americans call their primaries when they come to choosing the representatives of their two parties. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's similar, but here it's like everyone can take part of it, not only the members of the party.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that is different. Interesting.
Yeah,
And
and
is there quite a bit of
same day.
engagement?
Sorry?
Is there a lot of engagement in that process? Do people really want to take to sort of to play their roles in deciding who is the candidate?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's very important. I mean, because from time to time it's very easy. It's like you have just one political party, and then you just have to decide one out of, I don't know, two or three. But that's also the case that you have not only one. It's like three, four political parties. They decide to do this consultation together. So then you have to decide between four different political parties, let's say, and then they respect the election, and then they only send one candidate to the presidential election.
I see. Okay, all right. I mean, because in some of my research, then the sort of the early favorite at the moment is Gustavo Petro, who has who has an interesting history. So he was also the previous mayor of Bogota,
Yeah.
and he has a long parliamentary history. Okay, before that, in the 80s, I understand. Excuse me, I understand that he fought as a guerrilla. And so therefore, quite a lot of interesting background. But then I mean, there's no guarantee that he'll even go forward as a candidate, is there, under this system?
No, he's also part of one of this consultation. That's the so-called Pacto Histórico. And there are, if I'm not wrong, let me check, one, two, three, four or five people are competing that, but I do believe he's going to win this consultation, and then let's see what's going to happen then during the presidential election. So the guy is trying to win this election, I guess, for this second or third time. And now for the first time, he really has good chances to win it, and that would be also like the first time in Colombian history that someone from a left party would build the government.
Yeah, I mean, he came second, I believe, in 2018. So it looks as though he's ready. I mean, looking at some of the issues in Colombia at the moment, which appear to play a role, I guess it's quite easy to look at. But I mean, inequality continues to be a big issue. The economy in particular, the pandemic and the management of the pandemic, and violence clearly still is an important issue in Colombia too. So I mean, these are issues which you could practically say are important, in any country, even in European countries. It's not as though we have, and we've talked about this, isn't it? We don't have equality here either. I think perhaps violence is a bit more pronounced in Colombia, though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely exactly as you said. We have a huge problem with income inequality and also access to education, to the health system, and so on. We improve it. That's also true. So the country, for example, in terms of violence, is nothing compared to what we were experiencing or facing in the 90s. That we had this we were dealing with all this drug war and so on. Now the situation is a bit better, but far away from being a peaceful country.
Sure.
And in terms of the more economical challenge, let's say, there are also it's also the big question: how do we want to develop as a society? And I can, if we put it in very, very easy words, I could say that Colombia was always very influenced by the U.S. system, where it really like, okay, let's try to give people the opportunity, but at the end it's up to you. So it's not the really a thing of the state to provide the people with a minimum of, I don't know, dignity. And that's why you have this crazy inequality in Colombia. So you have people in Colombia earning really quite a lot of money, even more than the average here in Europe. But you also have people in Colombia like, yes, living in the streets and asking for some coins.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, unemployment is what, 13.8%, or as it was as of last year. So,
That's
um,
that's tricky because first you have to define unemployment. You know,
mm,
if you would see unemployment the same way we see it here in Europe, the unemployment would be around 50 something percent.
oh
You
wow,
know,
okay.
but the thing is, like in Colombia, for example, you have people that they are just selling candies on the streets or in the public transportation,
Mm,
and they are counted as employed people. You know,
oh,
they are not really taking a look into the like, for example, here in Germany you have the official numbers that you get straight from the Arbeitsagentur für Arbeit, like where you know, okay, how many people are now employed and paying taxes, and that's very easy. In
mm,
Colombia they have to do how do you call, like a pulse? Like they ask the people on the street, hey, what are you doing for a living? And if they say, yeah, I'm selling candies and I'm doing $2 per day, okay, then you
mm.
are employed. So
Okay, all
everyone
right.
who's doing something and getting money for it is in Colombia for our government, then is someone who is employed.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's just clearly a very different approach, an understanding of what we would say as employment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but then it's interesting that because I mean, Colombia has a very close relations with. I mean, it's a partner of NATO as of 2017. It's also got EU partnerships, common security and defense policy. The EU is also one of the largest sort of trading partners with Colombia. It also acts as an investor. So there is the EU Colombia Trust Fund.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are all of these different measures. Is the EU, however, seen as a potential positive influence on Colombian domestic affairs, or is the EU considered to be still something of a colonial third party which sees itself as being superior?
Hmm. Tough question. So from a historical perspective, I would say Colombia really always was trying to have the best relationship to the US and then to Europe, but letting very clear that the US should be our partner number one in all possible stuff. Yeah, and that's why we are also receiving quite a lot of money in military aid, in social aid, in quite a lot of things. Um, there are for sure some critical voices about this relationship because people say, okay, we are not really winning here, we are not earning anything, and it would be better if we try to be a bit more independent and also like building stronger partnerships to South America, to Central America, and all the let's say our neighbor countries. And I would say in the society, to answer your question a bit better, that the Europe and the US are seen as something very good and something we really dream about to be at some point something similar to the, let's say, regular European country or to the US. And I guess when people are I would say the regular Colombia, when they are growing up and they maybe don't have a lot of money, they always dream about when this day come that they can be in the United States for the first time. And if they have a bit more money than to be in Paris or in London. So I guess this is like it's seen and perceived as a good thing. Not my opinion, but that wasn't the question.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I have to prepare myself for your opinion then in that case, it
No, no,
seems.
no.
So, no, far more argumentative. Okay. And all right, generally speaking then, so an interesting question just popped into my head. Because of the distance between Colombia and what's happening in Ukraine at the moment, is the war, from what you know, as as commonly highlighted in Colombia as it is here in Europe?
Yeah, difficult one. Well, the thing is that, as you know, we have elections in 1 week and then also end of May. So for sure now the focus of all the news are on this subject, and that's also a good thing. And I would say since 2 or 3 days it became really relevant because some very important officials from the US were in Venezuela and trying to do some business again with Maduro because of they want to stop buying oil from Russia, so they need other suppliers. So Venezuela was till last week like a common enemy for the US and Colombia, and now the US, without asking or I don't know, like without consulting anything with Colombia, just went to Venezuela and they are trying now to do business again and so on. So at the end, we are also being affected. I don't know if in a positive or in a negative way, but for sure being affected by this war. I mean, nothing compared to the people that are dying and are losing their families and so on. So for sure not the case. But we are facing some consequences because of it, because the government now is like I would say a bit pissed off with the U.S. government that they were trying like to isolate Venezuela for the past 40 years, and that's done. That's over the night it's done. That the U.S. need oil, and then they don't care about Colombia anymore. I mean, it's not about Colombia, but about this common policy that they were trying to run.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because I mean, we kind of look at the way different communities react to different situations around the world, and the EU, even though I say the EU, European countries, even though they were quite aware, and in some cases even people got emotional about the wars in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, and some of the consequences that followed. We didn't see the same level of engagement that we have seen here with the Ukraine war, or with the war in Ukraine. And this is why I was, it was interesting for me to see whether or not the distance that exists between Colombia or South America and Ukraine would have sort of relegated that story. And so, but in fact, I mean, what's happened is it's highlighted a closer story, as in with regards to Venezuela, even though it is in some ways connected to the US foreign policy with regards to Russia indirectly. So there's still a sort of localized element which is drawing Colombia into the story.
Yeah, sure. And you also have these voices in I guess not only in Colombia, all over the world, that people are, I don't know how to explain it, but it's not that people are overreacting, but they are having a very different reaction compared to other wars that I would say they were similar, like they were not legal, they were not let's say like accepted or had the approbation from the United Nations and so on, and then was like okay, that's fine. So this is for sure always a moment that all people like doing some colonialism studies and Eurocentric studies are using to show how crazy double standards we have in our society. I mean, in our world society. When you see how people are reacting right now, and it's like I don't know, people have in mind, at least here in Europe, that Europe is a peaceful country, and that isn't the case. It's like the most violent criminal continent, I guess, in history, and this is just it's not a thing that that we are proud, that we are happy about it. These are facts. It's like a try to read a book about European history, and it's very difficult to find a chapter without a war inside. So it's not really that it's happening something special here. But yeah, I know for this generation that we belong, that could be like the first time, but it's also like the first time that you have it here. It's not that the first time that you are in war again, because yeah, I don't want to start mentioning any special war, but all these wars that we were having in the past maybe 4 or 5 decades, also Europeans were involved. So it's very difficult to understand this arrogance without being misunderstood as something that is for Putin or something. Because I guess war is always bad, and it's always a thing we should do everything to avoid. And it doesn't matter if it's here in Europe, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Latin America, whatever. It's just a horrible thing.
I mean, we do forget this quite simply put, and it's interesting to be reminded of it as well, Vlad. You're right. European history is just awash with war, conflict, and yeah, for loss of a better word, I suppose human rights violations. We tend to look back with a certain sense of romance at the French Revolution, for example, but we kind of paint over the fact that it had some very brutal elements. Reading some of the history to the development of Florence from something like the 10th century onwards, and the warring families and factions within Florence. We look at it as this wonderful place of learning because of the Renaissance. But even during the Renaissance, people were sort of dissecting enemies. There were battles and wars, and with the Vatican and with other sort of Genoa. It was non-stop. But history doesn't teach us those elements anymore. We only look to the learning, the development, the Enlightenment, the Renaissance. But there's a lot that happened or has happened in Europe that we really should try in some ways to remember, because you're right. It's not as a wonderful and rosy a garden as we seem to paint it now.
Yeah, that's absolutely, and also the way we are reacting. It's mean like something is very clear that what's happening, it's wrong from every single perspective. In the Ukraine, we should do everything to stop this war, and at the same time, everything what I'm seeing in the news, this is like I don't know how to understand it. Like you are now. But we are now like closing a lot of companies in Russia, and who is suffering then? How many people are now unemployed because of it? And are they all like Putin fans? I don't think so. And the same thing with the like the all the sports discussion, that the Russian sports people are now banned from, I don't know, quite a lot of tournaments. Even the football team should not participate in the next World Cup, and it's like why? That's where's the point? And we also have a similar situation in the past, and I'm not talking about 100 years ago. Let's say if we recall the situation in Iraq, it was very similar or even worse. Like they don't even have a reason to start this invasion there, and for sure you can remember the pictures we get from the news, the way how many bombs they just destroyed the country. They were not like trying to get there to control something. They just destroyed the country, right? And then we had here the World Cup in Germany 2006, and England, US were there. Then we have the World Cup 2010 was I guess in South Africa, and it was the same. And nobody were asking to ban anything or to do something. So yeah, I don't know what to do. And I was discussing it with a very close friend of mine last week, and I think these double standards, we shouldn't underestimate them, because I can imagine that's the reason why a lot of problems that we are facing in the world are still unsolved, and not because they are impossible to solve. It's just because we don't care. And I'm part of the problem. I'm not saying that I'm here the guy who is having just one standard. And yeah, or also having another discussion with a good friend. He told me something very interesting, and he told me, hey Vlad, look, better to have a double standard compared to have just one bad standard. And it was like, okay, fair enough, but still a problem.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you're right. The level of hypocrisy that exists in politics, in international relations, in economics, it's not a surprise in many ways. I mean, like we said, we talk about inequality, and I think inequality is also reflected in sort of political assessment and decision making. Hypocrisy will continue to exist on these, along these lines. I mean, yesterday I did a workshop on propaganda, and clearly, one of the first questions was to ask people to define good and bad. Yet there is no definition of what is good and bad. There is a question of what we find as a group to be good, and what we see as bad. And invariably, what is in our interests is good, or what is representative of us is good. And what goes against those interests is normally bad or evil. And
Yeah.
that seems to be the measure. There's no universal acceptance for what could be good.
No, absolutely. This is something that we build with our history, with our story. So actually, the human condition doesn't make any differentiation between good and bad. And yeah, you know that if you have a kid, a baby that is raised by a wolf, at the end he's gonna be a wolf. So
yeah, unless he's called Mowgli, in which case it's completely different. But anyway, yeah, we can talk about that another time. Yeah, Vlad. All right, so we have a kind of challenge before us. So we're going to create. Yeah, I keep thinking democracy, but that's not true, is it? Because we're not going to create democracy. What we're going to try to create is, so I was thinking about how we could do this. So basically, I've got my island, you've got your island, but then there should also be a third island, which is like collective, which we can take. So one, the best bit from your assessment, and the best bits from my assessment, and the ones that we agree upon, we can put onto this third island, which will then be perfect with regards to the political system that we are hoping to create. Now, I've gone ahead and sort of drawn up a few items on my list, and you've got your list. So how should we do it? Should we just basically go through like go through our top one, and then work our way down in each episode, and you give me your number one and I'll give you mine, and then we can argue the why this has to be number one. Does that work for you as a method?
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. I haven't thought of a name for my island yet, but I was thinking of calling it Zach's Island. Is that creative enough?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. All right. So, but do you want to go first? Tell me what your number one is.
My number one, the system is based on our own history and culture. That would be my number one. And should I elaborate a bit more, or do you want to?
Yeah, please just tell me a bit. I mean, I will then tell you mine, and then we can go into further detail. But I mean, why did you choose that as? Yeah, actually elaborate, and then I'll be able to put a better question to you.
It's for sure a bit tricky because it's the island, so maybe the island has no history and culture. But let's pretend that the island has been already there for some years, and we are. It's not only me. We are some people living there. But now we decide like okay, let's see how we can organize ourselves. And yeah, I think that if you ignore your own history and your own culture, then you are you are pretending to be something you are not, and you are gonna fail. It's for me, this is assured in the case you would ignore that. So I think in terms of history, we should take a look into problems that we had in the past, achievement that we have in the past, possible conflicts that we have in the past, or even wars that we had in the past, and to understand why was that the case. And in the case that we don't want to be again in this situation, then we have to understand all the things that had a relevant or significant influence on that moment. And the same with our culture. Are we people that we really want? Are we very talkative? Are we really people that want to talk about everything and to discuss about everything? Or maybe we are a society that we don't care about it. We just need two, three people that just decide for us. And I guess both ways are acceptable, but we have to figure out which is the way that we really need. Because in the case that we are very talkative and participative, but at the end we have a system that is just two, three people deciding everything, because that also working in another island, and that's why we want to copy that system to us, then we are going to have the impression that we have no rights, that we are in a, I don't know, disadvantage compared to these people making decisions. So in that case, okay, then let's organize something different. And the other way around would be the same. If the society is expecting from all the members to be participative and to be I don't know, like debating about everything, but we don't have the intention, then at the end we're going to have just bad informed people that are participating in decision-making processes and are just giving a bad influence to the whole process. And that's why I think that the system should base on our own history and culture.
Yeah, what I think is also fascinating is the different approach that we've taken, Vlad. So before we go into sort of the analysis and also reciprocal analysis of these themes, so you've taken a developmental system, and I've approached it as creating a system from the start and thereafter moving on. But you're talking about a process where the system will come once certain levels of understanding are attained. So therefore, that's why I'm kind of suggesting your system is developmental, whereas mine is a system from the start, as in it is the birth of what may become considered to be a legal territory.
That's why you love the person.
Well, yeah, I don't know. But I find that fascinating. I mean, essentially, the natural approach that human civilization has taken is the developmental form. It's just nobody would, or no society right now, I think, would choose to go back to a situation where they were re-experiencing social political development. Nowadays, if you establish an area and say, okay, this is our country now, one of the first things that would be done would be what I have put for number one is rule of law. So I would establish a sort of a legal system which kind of encompasses the laws, or you could say a constitution, more or less, or at least the start of a constitution. Whereas you've gone even further, not necessarily back, just taking a different system where you're saying is we have to reassess what we want through what we've learnt over the generations of our societal history. I find that brilliant, to be honest. I like it. And I like your approach.
I also like yours, but I have some questions. It's like if you start with the rule of law, then you need a law, and then it's the big question: who is creating the law? So who is defining this is good and this is bad, this is allowed, that isn't?
Well, I mean, this is the interesting thing, because lots of countries which establish a constitution, they tend to accept into their law what was considered Roman law. And so therefore you this in some ways this structure, this legal structure that exists and which is easy for people to adopt. The only stipulation that I have put with my rule of law is that equity overcomes all other considerations in legal disputes. So this is my sort of number one. So establish a rule of law, whether that's Roman law or some other body of law, doesn't matter. But that equity has to be at the top. And so if the sense of fairness is not represented by an individual law in a certain situation, then fairness should rule, as it were.
And equity for everyone, right?
Absolutely.
So you make absolute no differentiation between a criminal who raped, I don't know, 20 kids and someone who is engaged in, I don't know, working for the community. I mean, it's not it's a real question. I mean, it's a
yeah. No, fair is fair. And I think society will see that the person who has harmed innocence will receive the punishment that they deserve. So they would. Equity doesn't mean that you're elevating somebody who has a diseased mind to a certain level. What you are doing is you are judging that person on a fair system, and you have to believe in the system. I would imagine. But what is important to note here is that, for example, if you have a person who abuses, shall we say, children, who is a drunkard, who has no position in society, and they are punished in a certain way. But on the other hand, you've got like the president's child, and the president's child also abuses innocence in the same way, that they are both punished to exactly the same extent in exactly the same way. And that for me would be equity.
Okay. Yeah, totally agree. I got it.
Yeah. So yeah, all right, cool.
Okay.
But tell me a bit more about your. So, all right, let's say you've got like, I mean, what kind of period of time are we talking about studying the history, the social interaction, and the different levels of societal progress? How long would this process take before you start structure?
Yeah, for me, this is a never-ending process. So I wasn't saying that we should like wait for years of analysis and studies. I'm just saying the system, even the rule of law, the everything, the economical system. So everything within the system should be based on our own history and culture. And this is a never-ending process, as history has no end, at least not till today. So this is a thing that we are always reviewing. What are we doing, and the rule of law and so on. And that's why even if you have this system, you are changing the law from time to time. And it's not because we are just changing our mind. It's just because now we have a longer history, let's say, and we have some different culture in that is evolving. So it's for me this is like this is the main characteristic of the system, but it's not a step or a stage.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I repeat, I like it. I like the approach, especially because it's so different to mine. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Good.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can get to one in our discussion, and then after that, who knows where we'll go. But yeah, let's do. What's your second one?
Okay, my second one, or if I may, my second and third one, because they are really
please.
Connected. So the second one would be nobody has the obligation to participate. And the third one would be everyone has the right to earn the right to vote.
Okay, the right to earn the right to vote. Okay, number two I get, because most sort of established principles of democracy will involve the word participation. And you're saying that people can also choose not to participate, and so therefore that's their democratic right. Well, you're not basing it on a democracy. It's their right. Simple. They don't have to participate if they don't want to. But the third one, now obviously we've talked about this a bit in the past, so therefore I know kind of what you mean. But each person has the right to earn the right to vote. So there is a qualification process, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there should be a process where people need to be educated so people can really understand what are they doing when they are voting, that they can really understand how the system is working and the consequence of their decisions. So yeah, you know that from past conversations that we had in the past is something. I would say the easiest way to explain it is the driving license. It's like everybody can get a driving license, but the thing is, it would be too dangerous to let everybody drive a car without having some lessons before, because there is a system that you have to understand more or less. You have to know the differentiation between a red light and a green light, and if you have a yellow light, then you know, okay, that's something in between. And if you don't know that, then you're going to have a lot of accidents, right? And a lot of people are going to die. And I'm completely sure that the political system is by far more complex compared to the to all the transport system. So for me, it would be very dangerous to allow people to have the right to participate without being educated. But for sure, I would do some differences, because I know for the driving license you have to pay, and here it should be really a right, so you don't have to pay to get this qualification. That should be something that you can get from school, or maybe in school you weren't interested in, then you can do it later. So you can go to an institution that for sure we can elaborate who manage this institution and what kind of content are part of these classes. But you can go there, you can do a course, and then you can pass an exam, and then you have the right to vote. Right?
No.
And
Okay.
this is, for me, is something about a quality assurance that the people know. You know, if I know it here from Germany, when we not only used to say we know this compared to the world, Germany, we can say, is a well-educated, at least when we're talking about schooling, is a well-educated country. And when you ask the regular German about the German political system, they have no clue. And that's for me very dangerous. They have no clue how it works. They have no clue how laws are made. They have no clue who elect the Bundespräsident, for example. Just ask everyone in all your friends. Hey, how is the election of the Bundespräsident? It's actually the most important political actor within the German political system, and they don't know. So yeah, it's that the people really understand that if they decide to participate, this is a right that turns into a responsibility, and it's a huge one.
No, I mean the election of the federal president is not the most simplistic process. But anyway, I get your point absolutely. Yeah, I want comments though on that. First of all, also on the simile, as it were, the comparison of voting with driving. I think here we've also got to apply your principle of looking at history. Voting was something that 110 years ago, shall we say, was not allowed for the vast majority of the population. So women were not allowed at all to vote. And for men to be able to vote, they had to be, I think in the UK, you had to be over 30 and perhaps also be a homeowner. And so therefore, there were extremely limited numbers of people who could vote. And there we're talking about clearly a system of elitism. And this is why now any additional hindrance to voting, any additional barrier to voting, makes people think about how it was in the old days, where you basically had your aristocracy and your upper middle class, and these were the only ones who had any kind of access to political infrastructure. With driving, though, there's a difference, because normal people practically were able to drive right from the beginning. And also in Germany, having a license and having a car is almost as important as liberty itself. And so it's because there is no differentiation. Okay, I can be poor, you can be rich, but we can both drive cars. We both have access to the same roads. We may operate at different speeds, but that doesn't really matter, does it, too much? Because in most cases there are speed limits anyway. Not everywhere, of course, but in sort of certain urban environments and so on. And so therefore the comparison of this, the right to vote, is a bit more, how should we say? It's something which has a certain historical stigma attached to it, because it's sort of governed by elitism, whereas driving cars has more or less always been permitted to people because it was only created 100 or so years ago, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I see what you mean, but I don't see it as a problem. So the first thing, we are talking about an island, so they don't know about all the thing in the past in the UK and so on. So we are trying to create something very new. So we are not dealing with this kind of I don't say influence from bad experience in the UK. On the other hand, it should be exactly as you described with the driving license. We are starting for the very beginning. So everybody, if you are poor, if I'm rich, the other way around, we only have to visit this class, and then we get the right to vote, and we don't even have to pay. So we can go together, have a beer afterwards, and then we can vote on the next election. So I don't really see any single problem, because the access is really guaranteed for everyone, and you only have to do it if you are interested in. So you are going to have to have fun while doing it. And it's for free. It's for everyone. It's for men, for women, for poor, rich, and so on, right? And the things that I think people should know what they are doing. And for me, I would love that every single kid has opportunity, if she wants to become a doctor, to become one, right? I'm talking about medical doctors. And if they want to be surgeons, okay, yeah, they should do it. And I should do everything so they can have access to education, then they go to university, and they can be paid while learning how to do a surgery and so on. A very different thing would be everybody has the right to operate. Imagine everyone has the right to I don't know, to make a surgery in your heart.
Yeah, I wouldn't be around long, I think, if that were the case.
Yeah, so it's like we need qualifications. Qualifications are good, and even for the most simple position within a company nowadays, you need some kind of qualification. Even that, I don't know, maybe you just need to have finished school, but that's just one qualification. And we are talking about something without any real impact in the life of others. But when we talk about a political system, when we talk about common decision-making processes, then there's a huge responsibility that we can't ignore. And that's why I really want people to be educated before they make a decision.
And do you think that there is a certain stress attached to the right to vote? Do you think some people don't actually want to vote? Do you think it presents them with some kind of pressure?
I can imagine. Yeah, because actually, if you are in a democracy, then this is like I'm not sure, like the highest right that you can have. Like that's exactly why you can tell everyone we are living in a democracy. So yeah, I can imagine there's a certain pressure there, but not relevant for my island.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at like voting, let me look up like vote because I mean, since over the last few years, or the last few elections, voting numbers have really decreased, haven't they, in a number of countries? So, I mean, generally speaking, if you get anywhere near sort of like 56, 57, 58% of people voting, that's generally considered to be, quite high. Whereas, yeah, I think immediately after the Second World War, figures were up to like the high 70s. Perhaps even more in some cases. So people, even though we talk about democracy and having the democratic right to vote, the exercise of that right is not very popular.
Yeah, that's true, and that's also okay. I don't need to. That was exactly my second point. Nobody has the obligation to participate.
Yeah, that's why I'm looking at that particular concept, and it's like, yeah. So then why do we hold this concept of democracy so highly within our esteem, or what so many people? Okay, it's still a minority, but I mean, more or less 42, 43% of the population who can vote don't want to vote. And I always say to people, go out and vote. Yeah. And clearly there is this, because I've been educated in this way, that having a political opinion and a political position is important. But clearly there are large numbers of the population who, even if they have a political opinion, they don't care that they don't stop. Yeah, what do you mean is my democratic right? They say, how much of what I want actually happens? Even when the people I vote for don't do what they say, what's the point?
Yeah, there's a. It's for sure not easy to explain this situation, but for sure there are 2, 3 points that we can mention and help us to understand what's happening. And I guess the one thing is that maybe we are overestimating the power of voting, the power of politics within our own lives. So imagine, I don't know, last year, okay, Olaf Scholz won the elections, and that's why he's the chancellor right now. But imagine that wouldn't be the case, and the other guy from the CDU would have won. Do you really think we would have today a different day, or next year a different year? It's like the things that I mean, it's really an open question, but in my opinion, it's not really changing quite a lot. So for some people, that doesn't really make a difference. And in the same direction, countries like Germany, they are extremely stable. So a bit too boring for me. Between 1982 and 2021, so 40 years almost, the Germans had 3 chancellors. So imagine how stable that is.
Yeah.
Like you had Helmut Kohl 16 years, then Schröder 7 years, and then Merkel 16 years again. So then if you try to understand these things, like 40 years, 3 people deciding the direction of the country, steering the politics within the political system, then could be that you say, okay, if I go if I don't, that makes no difference.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just let's say a fact.
No, we tend, in the West, though, we do tend to value political stability. We consider political stability to be the measure of reliability in many ways. can you do business with a country where the leadership is constantly changing? Most investors would probably look at that and say, do you know what? I have no idea. How can I invest in a country when next week there could be a completely different leadership? I mean, who do you have to go and make a deal with every single leader again? So I think political stability is considered important.
That's true, but it also depends in how extremely or what kind of stability are we talking about? Because if we compared, okay, let's talk about the UK. It's like, okay, if you have one candidate saying, okay, I want to stay in the EU, and the other one saying, no, I want to go out, this is a huge difference.
Oh yeah.
You know? But here in Germany, we are talking about, okay, if you really want to differentiate between the people, let's say in the center, like from CDU to the Greens, including FDP and SPD, they agree in 90% of all the things that they are wanting. And that's cool. I mean, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but the difference, it's very difficult for someone who is not like really into the system. It's really different. It's really difficult to find some difference there. So for me, it actually doesn't change if Scholz is the chancellor or if the guy from the CDU or from the FDP is the chancellor. And in my case, I love politics. That's why we are talking here. That's why we are doing this podcast. So for me, it would be like, wow, I'm very happy I can vote. So I'm going to vote, and I'm going to read all the programs, and then I will decide. Right. But I can imagine there are other people like they are not interested in, because they know, okay, there's not going to be a huge difference. And by the way, because I now mentioned something that I think it's also important, the programs from the party. How many people do you really think that they read what political parties are proposing? I have no clue, but I would say not even 5% of people that are voting.
Yeah, I mean, manifestos tend not to be the most interesting documents anyway to be read. But you're right. I mean, a good example of this is 1987, when Mrs. Thatcher was elected, and she had in her manifesto the poll tax. And then when she actually introduced it, the people rose up in arms, and she had to leave because she so greatly misjudged the public mood for what they considered to be, a charge on their ability to vote, and they were not happy with that. So, and that was in the mandate. So you're right. But even politicians of their own parties don't always know what's in their manifestos. So it's, there's definitely a different consideration. How much do we actually engage in individual leaders' policies? So, I mean, Olaf Scholz, for example, the SPD, so the Social Democrats in Germany. I mean, one of his main themes was raising the minimum wage. And I mean, that was plastered everywhere. And maybe that's basically what pushed him up to a situation where he could become chancellor. I mean, he only got 20 in the mid 20s, or 23, 24%. So we're not talking about somebody who won by landslide. On the other hand, the party which is within that sort of selection of center parties, but which represented real change, in my opinion, was the Greens. There was so much change being suggested by Annalena Baerbock that I think the conservative structures in Germany really went crazy, and they showed also a certain level of sexism in the way that they approached her in the campaigning. And in the end, one of her main goals, which was to cancel Nord Stream 2, that's happening now. So, I mean, in itself, that's quite funny, because lots of people before and during the campaigning were saying, how can you cancel Nord Stream 2? We've invested so much in this. We need all of this oil and so on. And now Nord Stream 2's been cancelled anyway. Okay, I'm digressing. I know I'm moving on to different. We're in the realms of theoretical politics here, and not applicable politics. But yeah, okay. All right, look, I've made a note of this because these are things which we have to consider. I really like the history thing. I'm going to put a tick next to your history thing. Yeah. I think participation plays a role in every kind of sort of democratic definition, and so therefore, I think that has to go in anyway. With regards to your qualifying to vote, now I know for you this is a really important theme.
Yeah.
So I reckon this is something that let's stick in, I think, but we should leave it up to the people to decide if they really want to have a qualification criteria, because I think that takes a lot of defining in itself. And I'm not sure, even though you've proven the logic behind having it, because you would also then reduce the voting age, which is something that I really agree with. I think younger people should be allowed to vote, not just the 18-year-olds. And you're saying that, yeah, sure, even a 12-year-old or an 8-year-old can vote as long as they pass this qualification procedure. So, there are parts of that which I like as well. I'm just not sure if we can sell it to our island dwellers. Something to look at. But I'm not going to go into my number 2 or number 3 because we've already reached an hour. But just one extra point, though. I'm not going to have any cars on my island. I don't know what you're planning to do.
Any cars?
No cars on my island. People can ride bikes. There may be some kind of light rail system, but I don't know. But I'm going to try to make my island as carbon neutral as possible. And that means also no mass excavations, no destruction of trees and natural pathways or habitats and ecosystems. Just so that I can have these huge concrete caterpillars. No, thank you.
Wow, interesting. So it means you want to go back, I don't know, like it was here 300 years ago?
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I've seen some pictures of how different places were, like even just 50, 60 years ago, and the natural beauty that existed in so many places, simply to be replaced by hotels and shopping centers and so on. I don't see the need for so many of these things. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a different story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll come back to it. So we're only at the beginning. So this is our analysis. I mean, I'll call this series Democracy anyway, purely because I think calling it democracy pisses you off, and sometimes that's quite funny. So we'll call this like Democracy 1, and then we'll see where we go. Yeah, how does that strike you? Yeah, is that like a good way to proceed?
Yeah, I really enjoy it. So it's fascinating that at the end we really want the same thing, and we have to organize a society where everyone who is taking part of it can really live with dignity. So it's very interesting to see how many different approaches we can have, and we are just 2. So that's exactly the explanation why it is so difficult, because then we are not just the 2 of us. Then we are going to have 10, then 1,000, then 1 million, then 100 million, and yeah. Nowadays, we are, I don't know, almost 7 billion around the world. So imagine how difficult it is to organize it. If we would ask everyone to, hey, imagine you can get an island. What would you do? Yeah, and then everybody's like giving their own opinion. And at the end, you have democracy, and yeah, everything failed.
Okay, all right. So you love democracy, clearly. All right.
Yeah.
Vlad, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, and I love the fact that you test every thought that I consider to be quite normal. But that's cool, because then you make me think as well, and so brilliant. Thanks a lot. We're gonna have
thank you
to
very
talk.
much.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk again for the next. We've got to plan this now because we have the responsibility of doing a series, and I know you sort of start your new job soon, so we're gonna have to make sure that we can find a way that I can keep you coming back.
Yeah, let's do this, and yeah, and thank you as well. So it's for sure the pleasure is mine here.
Yeah, thank you. I hope it's the pleasure of whoever listens, but yeah, we'll see how that works out. Vlad, all the best, my friend. Take care.
Yeah, all the best. Thank you very much. Bye.